From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Soybeans take center stage in the Deep South.
The big reason is that the price has been good for soybean.
We head into the fields in Louisiana, where planting is going better than expected, as pasture and rangeland conditions continue to worsen.
To see a number like 56% this time of year is really sobering.
Farmers in Texas trying to protect what they have as they work in extreme drought conditions.
It's shaping up to be kind of a tough year, but us, everybody in agriculture, we're pretty resilient, we're pretty tough.
The situation on the ground right now on AgDay. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Recent rains and snow have brought much needed moisture to areas from Kansas to South Dakota, while above normal temperatures mixed with already dry soils continue to create a dangerous situation in the south. Now let's take a look at the latest drought monitor, which shows just over 53% of the country is in some sort of drought. A slight improvement from last week, but still 7% higher than where we were a year ago. Focusing in on the southwest, take a look at Texas and Oklahoma panhandles. Right now, where several counties are experiencing extreme and exceptional drought. In fact, 23% of Texas is in that exceptional category, and 80% of the state is in drought. Now, I spoke with Texas Ag Commissioner Sid Miller. He says over 100 counties have been declared disaster areas. Miller telling me the state has seen more than 700 wildfires impacting well over 100,000 acres. And he says the threat remains due to the combination of low humidity and high winds. He says farmers and producers need to use what he calls cowboy logic.
Number one of the main causes of fires is wheel bearings, hot wheel bearings going along the farm market roads where the grass is high. So make sure you keep those wheel bearings packed and ready so we can avoid that. That's an easy one. Of course, avoid cutting or welding in the open if the winds are high, and if you have to do that, be prepared to put out a grass fire. Carry a fire extinguisher. I mean, that's a no-brainer. If you don't have a fire extinguisher, carry a 2-gallon pump-up sprayer. It's better than nothing. And a lot of people don't know, but if you can carry a leaf blower and snuff out a grass fire pretty quick, just like blowing out a match. So they work really, really well.
For bigger fires, Miller recommends that producers keep their crop sprayer adaptable where appropriate. And those drought conditions playing into current pasture and rangeland conditions right now, rated 56 poor to very poor, leading the nation at 89% poor to very poor. It's a tie between Montana and Arizona. Now, a couple of other states in the Great Plains are above 70%, including Texas, coming in at 74% of the pasture and rangeland rated poor to very poor. And Nebraska in at 73%. And this is also very telling. 56% of the cattle inventory right now is within an area experiencing drought, which you see on this map, covered in those red lines, along with 56% of the cotton crop and a whopping 69% of the winter wheat crop.
That 56% for this time of year is really staggering because the all-time record going back to the mid-90s is 59%, and that occurred in late summer of 2012. So we typically see declining rangeland and pasture conditions as you move through the mid to late summer months. That's very normal. Pastures tend to brown out, and so to see a number like 56% this time of year is really sobering and indicates that we could be in big trouble in terms of production from those pastures and rangelands from the Great Plains westward as we move through the summer, unless things really turn around from a weather standpoint. We're looking at topsoil moisture rated 15% surplus, and on the flip side, we see 32% rated very short to short. In terms of change from last week, that 15% is down from 16% surplus a week ago, but 32% very short to short. That is a slight change from last week's 34%. I want to talk about the driest areas first. We continue to focus on the Great Plains and the Rocky Mountain states. There's 10 states in that region. We see 8 of those 10 states reporting topsoil moisture at least 60% very short to short on May 1st.
Meteorologist Matt Yurosavik joins us now with a closer look at the latest drought monitor. Matt, some minor improvement over time to highlight here.
Yeah, Clinton, a few improvements, but still the south staying very, very dry. Parts of Texas and Oklahoma getting a little bit worse with those drought conditions. So let's take a look at the last 4 weeks here, show you some how that drought monitor kind of moves with some moisture here and there, but elsewhere staying a little bit drier, especially back towards parts of New Mexico, western Texas into Oklahoma. You're going to see that area of extreme to exceptional drought really expand over the last couple of weeks. Meanwhile, if you look up in the northern plains, parts of the northwest, I saw some improvements there a little bit, even towards the west coast as well. So that's something we'll continue to watch. More rain, though, through today and into the weekend for parts of the Ohio Valley and off into the mid-Atlantic as that storm system we highlighted yesterday continues to move eastward with upwards of 2 to 3 plus inches of rain for some locations. And behind this, while it gets warm and even hot and humid down in the south and east, as we're heading through next week, a big ridge sets up, creating very warm conditions, really from the Rockies on to the east. Meanwhile, it'll stay very unsettled and cooler back in the west. And farmers are busy doing a little field work in Nebraska. Morgan Wires of Hay Springs says there's no baseball involved, but this is their field of dreams. And we hope your dreams come true, Morgan. I'll have more on your forecast coming up.
In China, the capital city of Beijing is undergoing mass COVID testing measures. Despite cases being relatively low, authorities are conducting a 6th round of mass testing for some 20 million residents. This is all in an effort to avoid having to lock down the city like officials did in Shanghai. Even though Shanghai is starting to reopen, take a look at this map. All that yellow represents ships waiting to load or offload in and around Shanghai. However, 6 weeks after the Shanghai lockdowns began, 2 ocean liner CEOs say they haven't caused container shipping havoc for their operations. The leaders of Maersk and Matson saying that the port of Shanghai is open and operating. Maersk saying issues at trucking and warehouses in the city are slowing things down, and it is impacting their volumes out of China, but less than they would have expected. Matson reporting the impacts to its operations have been minimal. COVID has done many things to the U.S. economy, including more than doubling the trade deficit. In March, the trade gap for goods and services surged 22% month over month to nearly $110 billion. Now that's according to data from the Commerce Department, which says typically the trade deficit hovers around $40 or $50 billion a month. Now on the ag side, there are significant changes happening as well. In March, U.S. ag exports rose to $17.7 billion. That's up nearly 9% from the month prior. However, ag imports to the U.S. set a new record in March. They were up 23% to $17.8 billion, creating a monthly trade deficit of $118 million. That said, so far this year, the U.S. still has a trade surplus of roughly $15.5 billion for ag goods. South America is experiencing its own drought and dryness issues. We'll discuss that next, coming up in analysis. And later, Louisiana farmers are facing favorable weather to start planting season. We'll check in on soybean acres in the country.
Find farm equipment on Machinery Pete's May 17th online auction. No reserve, no buyer fees. Start bidding now at auctions.machinerypete.com.
A few weeks back, the White House announced plans to release the country's emergency oil reserves to help combat rising prices at the pump. Now, it's planning to replenish those stocks. Thursday, the Energy Department expected to announce a buyback plan where the government would seek bids to buy 60 million barrels of crude oil. It would be the first time since the early 2000s the department has acquired large quantities of oil for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Now, the stockpile has been drained by recent policy decisions focusing on combating higher pump prices and sales mandated by Congress to raise revenue. It's not a quick fix, though. The process will take years. 60 million barrels will only refill about 1/3 of what was released. Now, the Biden administration hoping the buyback plan will encourage domestic oil production by guaranteeing a source of future demand. We're joined today by Dan Bossy with Ag Resource Company. Dan, as we look at kind of global production here, obviously South America still trying to get a corn crop coming in, that Safrinha corn crop. How's that going so far?
Well, we thought it was going relatively well, as USDA did. They gave a crop size of 88.5 million metric tons for that baby corn crop called Safrinha. not so much, not so small anymore. But the weather has been very harmful for about 65% of those acres in Mato Grosso, Goiás, and Mato Grosso do Sul, where we've really gone about 30 to 35 days now without any rainfall. And so in Brazilian soils, they leach very quickly. And so with the drought that was already existing before, and now this lack of rain, the crop is coming downwards. We at my office in Ag Resource Brazil have cut the number to 104. That's versus USDA's 116. And we're still fearful that rains will not arrive, and we'll see a further cut in the months ahead.
So as we start to look at global supplies, what does this mean if we keep trimming down that second crop in South America?
Well, we've already lost, or we would assume we've lost, some portion of the Ukrainian corn export potential, as the Russians have all Ukrainian ports blockaded at the moment, and that grain can't make it out other than rail through maybe Romania or Poland. So I was really counting on our friends in Brazil to help out as we got into the end of summer, July or August, when that crop is harvested, available to export markets. If it comes down, crop size I'm now talking about, the Brazilians will keep more of it, and of course world demand will have to shift to the United States. So we were already thinking about record large U.S. corn exports at around 2.9 billion bushels. If Brazil's crop ends up being, let's say, as small as 100 or 102, that number may become 3 billion or more. And the question is, logistically, will the U.S. have enough export capacity to get soybeans and corn out at the same time at a record clip?
That'll be something to watch. Sure appreciate it, Dan. Thank you so much. We'll be back with more AgDay coming up in just a minute.
It's time to sign up for the 2022 United Pork Americas Conference in Orlando, Florida. Register today at UnitedPorkAmericas.com and join us September 7th through the 9th.
Meteorologist Matt Yurosavik joining us here. And Matt, we've been watching this drought monitor develop, and obviously down in the southwest, western U.S., still pretty severe.
Yeah, we've got severe to exceptional drought back there, even in parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. Meanwhile, some improvements up in the north. And those improvements up in the Dakotas, as we were talking about, some rain there over the past month or two, but we saw some improvement after those winter storms and a lot of rain there in the past week, and still saw a little bit of improvement there, northern Rockies over towards the North Pacific coast, but down here, parts of Texas, parts of Oklahoma, back into New Mexico, still seeing that extreme to exceptional drought, and that is going to persist even through central Texas with not a lot of moisture expected as we head through this week. More unsettled conditions back in the Rockies, but staying dry in the east, which means some of these conditions along the east coast could get a little bit worse. And yeah, there's the parts of Texas from Amarillo all the way down near El Paso, and then eastward as we look toward San Antonio, up toward Dallas as well. Most of the state covered in some sort of drought condition there in Texas, and a lot of Oklahoma and New Mexico, much of the same. Now, the severe weather risk is east as that storm system continues to drop rain, and down out ahead of that cold front, that's where we're going to see the chance for stronger storms before that moves back into the northern plains, parts of Nebraska and South Dakota for Saturday. So that severe weather risk kind of relocating itself back towards the west. There's that storm system continuing to move eastward, still dropping rain in the Ohio Valley and then moving into the mid-Atlantic as the cold front swipes off the coast. Then we'll start to get our severe weather chance back there in the northern plains with that cold front and the moisture coming out of the Rockies heading into Saturday. So a lot of moisture out here with this storm system heading through the mid-Atlantic states, and then a little bit more of that in the northern Rockies there, parts of the northern plains as well. Temperatures out ahead of this thing, very warm, very muggy, but then getting cooler behind this. And this is going to open the door to temperatures that could be well above average in the east as we're heading through next week. And we'll continue to track that right here on Ag Day. That's a look around the country. Now let's take a look at the weather where you live. Richmond, Kentucky, showers and thunderstorms, a high of 74 degrees. 84 the high in Libertyville, Alabama, with thunderstorms likely. And back to Montana, Conrad, windy and sunny, a high of 62.
A diesel engine that runs on ethanol. We have an update on the latest technology coming to market next. And later, southern growers typically get an early jump on the planting season. So how close are they to being done? We get an update from Louisiana in the country. We've been keeping you updated on this one company's effort to convert diesel trucks to net zero engine technology using ethanol, and the process could take another giant leap forward in just a few months. Clear Flame Engine Technologies has created a drop-in system that enables renewable fuels like ethanol to be easily integrated into existing big diesel engines. Now, earlier this year, they took the technology out of the lab and on the road, completing a road test of a heavy-duty truck powered by 100% renewable plant-based fuels. Now, in this case, the Class 8 diesel truck ran on renewable E98 ethanol.
It is everything that you would expect out of a diesel truck. We're running it through our own internal tests right now, running it with professional drivers to make sure to ultimately get to the goal of they can't tell they're not driving a diesel. Making great progress on that effort, planning for our first fleet handoffs that we're going to make to some fleets in the agriculture sector in June and July.
After that, Johnson says they plan to add the technology to some of the larger commercial non-agriculture fleets in the late summer. At the same time, they're working with the EPA to show that the technology works and is safe, and that process won't be completed until later next year. President Biden is pledging to, quote, combat hunger and improve nutrition for every American. Now, the president announcing a hunger, nutrition, and health conference to take place in September. The White House says more than 10% of Americans were food insecure, and hunger rates spiked during the early months of the pandemic.
There are too many empty chairs around the kitchen table because a loved one was taken by heart disease, diabetes, or other diet-oriented diseases, which are some of the leading causes of death in our country. And the toll of these diseases are not distributed equally. It's higher in certain racial and ethnic groups, including Black and Hispanics and Native Americans, families with low incomes, and those living in rural areas.
Now, the White House will hold listening sessions ahead of the conference to gather ideas on how to meet its goal of ending hunger and increasing healthy eating and physical activity by the year 2030. It will be the first presidential hunger conference since 1969. Farmers are rushing to get the 2022 crop in the ground. Up next, we stop in Louisiana to see how much progress farmers are making getting soybeans planted ahead of summer heat.
Find farm equipment on Machinery Pete's May 17th online auction. No reserve, no buyer fees. Start bidding now at auctions.machinerypete.com.
Louisiana soybean planting is well ahead of last year's pace and is making good progress. USDA is saying in its latest crop progress report that 59% of the state's soybean crop has been planted. That's well above the 5-year average of 43% and a big jump from last year at this time. And as LSU Ag Center reporter Craig Gautreaux tells us, the state is expected to increase its acreage because of higher prices.
What a difference a year makes. Last year's soybean planting was plagued by wet and cool weather and ran well behind schedule. This year's start has been fast because of favorable planting conditions. Farmers will need the weather to cooperate to get all their acres planted.
The USDA estimates Louisiana will plant 1.2 million acres in 2022, which would be about 11% more than last year.
Two issues have been fueling the growing acreage of soybeans. Market prices are good for soybeans, and the high price of nitrogen fertilizer has caused some farmers to move away from crops that require a significant amount of nitrogen, such as corn.
The big reason is that the price has been good for soybean, and in particular this year, the input cost has been a little bit higher. So especially without needing to put nitrogen out, soybean can have a little bit lower input cost.
The best yield potential requires soybean farmers to get their crop in the ground in early May. Another factor helping yield is planting in fields that do not have actively growing weeds.
If you can start clean without weeds and you get a pre-emerge out, that's going to help you a lot to not have that big flush of weeds to try to control later.
Mosley was planting one of his test plots on the Northeast Research Station near St. Joseph.
We have small plots that are grown on 7 research stations, but we also grow large strip trials, and mostly we grow those on producers' farms.
Mosley is studying 123 different varieties on research stations and 31 varieties on producer farms. With the LSU Ag Center, this is Craig Gautreaux reporting.
All right, thanks, Craig. And that's all of our time this morning. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day, and thanks for watching.